When the T-34 tank entered service in 1940, it introduced a design that would fundamentally change armored warfare. At a time when many tanks relied on flat, vertical armor plates, the T-34 used sharply sloped armor. This design increased the effective thickness of the armor without adding extra weight. Incoming shells were more likely to deflect or lose penetrating power on impact, making the tank far more difficult to destroy than its actual armor thickness might suggest. This approach gave the T-34 a major advantage over early German tanks. Weapons that could penetrate vertical armor often struggled against angled surfaces. As a result, the T-34 could survive hits that would disable many other tanks of the same era. Mobility was another key part of its revolutionary design. The T-34 was equipped with wide tracks and a powerful diesel engine, allowing it to move effectively across difficult terrain. On the Eastern Front, where mud, snow, and poor road conditions were common, this capability was critical. Many German tanks became stuck or slowed down in such environments, while the T-34 maintained movement and operational flexibility. The combination of protection and mobility made the T-34 highly adaptable on the battlefield. It could advance, maneuver, and reposition more effectively than many of its opponents. This balance between armor, speed, and terrain capability set a new standard for tank design. The T-34's innovative approach influenced not only Soviet strategy during the war, but also tank development worldwide. Its sloped armor and mobility became key features in future generations of armored vehicles. Another key factor behind the effectiveness of the T-34 tank in the early years of World War II was its 76.2 millimeter main gun. When the tank entered combat in 1941 during the German invasion of the Soviet Union, this gun provided a significant advantage over many German armored vehicles of the time. Most German tanks in 1941, such as the Panzer III and early Panzer IV variants, were equipped with relatively short-barreled guns designed primarily for infantry support rather than tank-to-tank combat. In contrast, the T-34's 76 millimeter gun had higher velocity and better armor penetration. This allowed it to effectively engage and destroy German tanks at moderate to long distances. The gun's performance meant that the T-34 could both defend itself and take the offensive. It was capable of penetrating the armor of most German vehicles it encountered during the early stages of the war, while its own sloped armor provided strong protection in return. This combination created a balance of firepower and survivability that was difficult for German forces to counter initially. Additionally, the T-34 carried high explosive ammunition, making it effective not only against armored targets, but also against infantry positions, artillery, and defensive fortifications. This versatility increased its value on the battlefield. In 1941 and 1942, this firepower advantage contributed to the shock experienced by German forces when they first encountered the T-34. It demonstrated that the Soviet Union had developed a tank capable of outperforming many of its early war opponents, forcing Germany to rethink its own armored designs and tactics. When German forces launched Operation Barbarossa in June 1941, they expected to face Soviet tanks that were largely inferior to their own. Instead, they encountered the T-34 tank, a vehicle that immediately challenged German assumptions about armored superiority. Early encounters with the T-34 created confusion and concern among German commanders. Standard anti-tank weapons and tank guns often struggled to penetrate its sloped armor, especially from the front. Meanwhile, the T-34's 76 millimeter gun was fully capable of destroying German tanks, like the Panzer III and IV, at effective combat ranges. This imbalance meant that German crews were suddenly facing an opponent that could both withstand their fire and return it with lethal effect. German reports from the Eastern Front described the T-34 as a serious threat. In some cases, German units had to rely on improvised tactics, such as targeting the sides and rear of the tank, or using heavier weapons like the 88 mm anti-aircraft gun to destroy it. These measures were effective but not always practical in fast-moving combat situations. The appearance of the T-34 forced Germany to reconsider its tank design philosophy. It highlighted the importance of sloped armor, better gun performance, and improved mobility. This realization directly influenced the development of later German tanks, particularly the Panther, which incorporated several features inspired by the T-34. In this way, the T-34 did more than just fight effectively. It reshaped German armored strategy and demonstrated that the Soviet Union possessed a level of technological capability that had been underestimated at the start of the war. One of the most important reasons the T-34 tank became so effective was not just its design, but how easily it could be produced. Unlike many German tanks, which were complex and time-consuming to manufacture, the T-34 was designed with simplicity and large-scale production in mind. As the war intensified, the Soviet Union relocated many of its factories east of the Ural Mountains to protect them from German advances. In these new locations, production of the T-34 was reorganized for speed and efficiency. Non-essential features were removed, manufacturing processes were simplified, and parts were standardized. This allowed factories to produce tanks quickly, even under difficult wartime conditions. The result was a massive production advantage. While Germany built relatively small numbers of complex tanks like the Tiger and Panther, the Soviet Union produced tens of thousands of T-34s. This numerical superiority meant that losses on the battlefield could be replaced rapidly. Soviet forces could continue launching large-scale armored operations, even after suffering heavy casualties. Simplicity also made the T-34 easier to repair in the field. Crews and maintenance units could fix damaged tanks more quickly compared to more complicated German designs. This kept more vehicles operational at any given time. In the end, the T-34's production strategy became one of its greatest strengths. It demonstrated that in total war, the ability to build large numbers of reliable machines could be just as important, if not more important, than having the most technologically advanced design. By 1943, German tanks such as the Panther and Tiger had begun to outmatch earlier versions of the T-34 tank in terms of firepower and armor. In response, the Soviet Union introduced an upgraded version known as the T-34-85 in 1944. This variant addressed many of the limitations of the original design while maintaining its strengths. The most significant improvement was the new 85mm main gun. This weapon offered much greater armor penetration than the earlier 76mm gun, allowing the T-34-85 to effectively engage newer German tanks at more competitive ranges. While it still required good positioning and tactics, the upgraded firepower restored the T-34's ability to fight on more equal terms against heavily armored opponents. Equally important was the redesigned turret. The earlier T-34 models had a two-man turret, where the commander also had to act as the gunner. This placed a heavy workload on the commander and reduced overall battlefield awareness. The T-34-85 introduced a three-man turret, separating the roles of commander, gunner, and loader. This greatly improved efficiency, communication, and reaction time during combat. The larger turret also provided better visibility and more space for the crew, enhancing coordination in fast-moving battles. These changes made the T-34-85 not only more powerful but also easier to operate effectively under combat conditions. By combining improved firepower with better crew organization, the T-34-85 ensured that the T-34 remained a competitive and effective tank through the final stages of World War II. Another major strength of the T-34 tank was its ability to operate in some of the harshest conditions of World War II. The Eastern Front presented extreme challenges: deep mud during seasonal rains, freezing temperatures in winter, and vast distances with limited infrastructure. Many vehicles struggled in these conditions, but the T-34 was specifically designed to handle them. One of its key advantages was the use of wide tracks. These distributed the tank's weight more effectively, allowing it to move across soft ground, snow, and mud without becoming stuck as easily as narrower-tracked vehicles. This gave Soviet forces greater mobility, especially during offensives in difficult terrain. The T-34 also used a diesel engine, which was less flammable than the gasoline engines used in many German tanks. This reduced the risk of catastrophic fires when the tank was hit. The engine also provided a good balance of power and efficiency, helping the tank maintain movement across long distances. Although the T-34 was not perfect and did suffer from mechanical issues, especially in early production models, it was generally more reliable under battlefield conditions than many of its German counterparts. Its simpler design made it easier to repair, even with limited tools and resources. This combination of mobility, durability, and adaptability allowed the T-34 to remain operational in environments where other tanks might fail. In the harsh conditions of the Eastern Front, this reliability became a decisive advantage in sustaining large-scale military operations. The T-34 tank played a central role in the major Soviet offensives that turned the tide of World War II on the Eastern Front. Its combination of mobility, firepower, and mass production allowed the Soviet Union to conduct large-scale armored operations that overwhelmed German forces. During battles such as Battle of Stalingrad and Battle of Kursk, the T-34 formed the backbone of Soviet armored units. At Kursk in 1943, thousands of tanks were deployed on both sides, making it the largest tank battle in history. The T-34's numbers, combined with defensive preparations and coordinated tactics, helped blunt the German offensive and eventually push their forces back. As the war progressed, Soviet strategy increasingly relied on deep offensive operations. Large formations of T-34s were used to break through enemy lines and advance rapidly into the rear, disrupting supply lines and encircling German units. This approach placed constant pressure on German forces, forcing them into defensive positions. The T-34's mobility allowed it to exploit breakthroughs quickly, while its numbers ensured that losses could be replaced. Even when individual tanks were destroyed, the overall momentum of Soviet offensives continued. By the later stages of the war, the T-34 was a key instrument in the Soviet advance toward Berlin. Its role in these major offensives demonstrated that success in modern warfare depended not only on individual vehicle performance, but also on the ability to deploy large numbers effectively within coordinated military strategy. By the end of World War II, the T-34 tank had established itself as one of the most influential tank designs in history. Its impact extended far beyond the battlefield, shaping how tanks would be designed and used in the decades that followed. One of its most important contributions was the effective use of sloped armor. This concept, which combined protection with reduced weight, became a standard feature in post-war tank design worldwide. The balance between firepower, mobility, and protection, all demonstrated by the T-34, also became a guiding principle for future tanks. After the war, the T-34 remained in service in many countries. It was exported widely to Allied nations and continued to be used in conflicts well into the Cold War. Its durability, ease of maintenance, and simple design made it suitable for long-term use, even in regions with limited industrial infrastructure. The tank also influenced the development of the modern main battle tank concept. Instead of separating tanks into heavy and medium categories, post-war designs focused on creating a single, versatile vehicle capable of performing multiple roles, a philosophy closely aligned with what the T-34 had already demonstrated during the war. Even decades after its introduction, the T-34 is still studied by military historians and engineers. It represents a shift in thinking, proving that effectiveness in warfare depends not just on advanced technology, but on the right balance between performance, production, and practicality.